We got to get into what matters most. A couple bits of NBA news in the slow doldrums of August. Jarrett Allen, 3-year extension that'll keep him in Cleveland theoretically for the next 5 years. $131 million over those 5 seasons for Mr. Allen. Cavs running it back, it would seem. We've got Luke Kennard going back to the Grizzlies on an $11 million 1-year deal. And Precious Achiuwa 1 year, $6 million to the New York Knicks. Brendon, we'll start with you. Which one of those matters most?
My answer is Luke Kennard, but I think we should actually start with you because the biggest news is the one that you think is the biggest, I think, if we're all being honest.
Yeah.
I have a case, and I will gladly make it for the Memphis Grizzlies, who I am all in on to the 100 percentile, but the Cavs are just not doing any of the things we thought this offseason was going to be about outside of hiring a coach. They retained the guy we all thought was gone.
I am surprised that we've gotten here. Kobe Altman goes to his postseason media availability, and he basically says, we're going to run it back. Like, we're going to get a new coach. Thank you to JB for your service. They get Kenny Atkinson after that long process. They're effectively running it back. His word has ended up true. There's something going on the edges right now. Michael Scotto from Hoopside has reported that they're trying to do a sign and trade with Brooklyn for Dorian Finney-Smith involving Isaac Okoro. So Okoro goes out in the sign and trade. They take back Dorian Finney-Smith. Okoro, they're offering him below the mid-level right now, between $8 to $10 million. Okoro's looking for like 12 to 15. So there's something to be figured out there. But that's a marginal move. The big move would have been a Jarrett Allen trade. It would have been a Darius Garland trade. We know from Jake Fisher, the Spurs called about Garland. They didn't rebuff. We don't know what the offer was, obviously, but they didn't do a Garland trade. I am pretty surprised that this is actually where this ended up because I still don't think it makes sense. I think Jarrett Allen on this contract is good value. I think it's a good contract. I think Allen is worth it. That is one of the non like pure all-star centers. That's one of the first. That would be probably the first non like apex center I would want on my roster. He can do just about everything aside from Bam. I think it's like, and I would have Bam in that upper tier. He can rim protect. He can play drop. He can step up with the line. He can switch. He can dunk. He can do a little bit of DHO work. Like he can do kind of everything you would want to do aside from 3-point shooting as a 5 in the modern NBA.
Yeah, here's a question.
Also
actually,
now since they're making Mobley even more.
Since they're making the same amount of money, him or Hartenstein, who do you guys like more? Who would you rather have? They're basically making $30 million each and have a decently similar skill set. Who do you like more if you were to just like get your pick to add either of them to a roster in a vacuum?
I think I would go Jarrett Allen.
I would go Jarrett Allen as well.
Yeah.
I like it too. I think the finishing, the downhill ability, kind of the paint offense, I think is nice. Even though the passing might be a little worse, maybe.
Yeah, Hartenstein offers more playmaking if you need that as like a fulcrum of your offense. Allen doesn't totally offer that, but Allen I think is a better finisher and he's much more of a lob threat in that traditional 5 sense.
Hartenstein's a better rebounder. He's more physical. I think Jarrett Allen is just a guy who could be productive, which is just so rare at that position. It also sort of depends on the team. I know you probably didn't want to go down this rabbit hole, but
yeah,
it does. A team that didn't need production from the center spot. You know,
like if I was like the Pacers, I would rather have Allen, but if I was the Thunder, I think Hartenstein makes more sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I am surprised that we ended up here with Cleveland. It just felt like this was going to be a summer where especially if you got Mitchell to resign, and they did, it felt like that demanded some kind of pivot. And whether that was Allen or Garland or both or whatever it was going to be, I think we knew they were going to give Mobley the rookie max extension. I think we knew they wanted to keep Mitchell. And it felt like they needed to do something else to evolve. And they're saying, Kenny Atkinson, you will evolve us. That to me is risky. That to me carries a lot of risk to bet all of that on Kenny Atkinson getting more out of Garland, more out of Mobley, and the same rough structure of your team still being in place.
So they've got now Donovan Mitchell committed under contract through at least 2027. Garland is under contract through 2028. Jarrett Allen through 2029. Evan Mobley through 2030. This is the team, right? And I think we all thought that there was going to be some kind of pivot here, but this is why the Cavs were in such a tough spot in the first place. It's really hard to trade Jarrett Allen when he's the best two-man game partner with the player you just committed the franchise to in Donovan Mitchell, right? You're really going to sign Donovan Mitchell to a contract extension and say, you know what? The guy who you run pick and roll with the best, he's out of here. That's sort of the tough thing that they've got to do between Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, and I've talked about this for a long time. Everybody agrees that Evan Mobley would be better off playing center, in Cleveland. Everybody agrees that Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley don't exactly work together, but you're sort of in win now mode, and you're just going to get rid of a good player because the developmental guy isn't necessarily developing the way you want him to. When you have your star guy already in Donovan Mitchell, it'd be one thing if you didn't have Donovan Mitchell, then it makes a little bit more sense to sort of build everything around Mobley, but you don't. The other part about this too is if you were going to trade Jarrett Allen, where were you going to trade him?
That's the thing.
Everybody says New Orleans. It's like, I don't want Brandon Ingram. I don't want to pay that next contract. No way. I'd rather just have Jarrett Allen. And the Oklahoma City Thunder figured their thing out when they signed Hartenstein. They were another team that was sort of a rumored destination for Jarrett Allen. So show me the team that really wants to trade for Jarrett Allen. Now, I think the Golden State Warriors would have made a lot of sense for them. They obviously did not agree with me. They've been chasing the Larry Markkinen tail this whole summer. Yeah. The other part about this, too, is Darius Garland. I think we all also agree probably best to split up that backcourt. Who's trading for Darius Garland? He's a really good player.
The Spurs
Who's
tried.
for him?
We know the Spurs tried to, but we don't. If the offer was
tried,
sort of, and like, but what does that even mean? And if you're Cleveland, yeah,
they lowballed Cleveland.
Yeah, it was like,
and then the Spurs decided that they could just get Chris Paul, and they said, you know what, we'd rather just do this on a short-term thing and then figure out our point guard situation later.
Yeah.
And then once the Spurs went off the board, and by the way, once the Brooklyn Nets also went off the board when they did that their swap for their own picks coming back and all this, basically opening the door for them to tank and purposely not be good, they had no interest in trading for Darius Garland. So there's not really a team out there that makes a whole lot of sense that should be trading for Darius Garland, or at least giving the Cavs something worthwhile to come off of a player who has been in an all-star game and is still a very good player in a vacuum, even if we agree the fit's not that good, and you say, well, I guess let's just figure out what the new coach can do with it, because all these guys are under contract. They're all relatively young. We can make these trades later if we have to.
I also would add that I think they're probably looking at this, and this is where I sympathize with this and agree with this to some degree, is that I think Kenny Atkinson is going to be the best coach for Darius Garland that Darius Garland has ever had. John Beilein was not that. JB Bickerstaff was not that. If Atkinson is anything, we have a track record of him. He has made his point guard better. Even in I would think you could say in Brooklyn, not all the pieces fit together perfectly in the way you'd want to build a perfect team. And he got really good stuff out of D'Lo. He got really good stuff out of Dinwiddie. He got good stuff out of Karis LeVert there, and making all of those guys work. I do
Best
think
seasons for all of those guys,
right? And it's like if you said, okay, I'm still scared about it. I still would want to split them up, I think. But if you're the Cavs and you're saying there's not a great offer for us out there, and we don't really want to go in the Brandon Ingram business, we don't want to just get bad picks back just for the sake of moving Garland and have to go scramble to find something else when we trade this big salary. I do kind of understand saying like, okay, at least we have Kenny Atkinson and maybe we figure this out for 6 months or a year or something, and then we can pivot from there. But at least you can see what a coach with a more modern, proven sensibility can do with this guy. Like it's not perfect, but if the market dictated that, I also understand how you get there, even if I don't love it.
Yeah, look, with Allen, forget Ingram. They weren't going to trade for Ingram. It would have been a 3-team deal. They're getting something. Ingram's going somewhere else. Allen's going to New Orleans. The Pelicans have a crappy contract structure. That's part of why they're stuck. They have McCollum and Ingram making a ton of money who nobody really wants. And then a lot of their mid-tier guys are untouchable. Murphy, Herb Jones, whatever. Those guys aren't going anywhere because they want them. So let's set that aside. We don't know what the market was, probably because that deal just was going to be too messy, and that's why they're in the position that they're in. I think we all can get how they came to that conclusion that wasn't worth pursuing, and okay, fine. But they also didn't have to extend him. The money's fine. He'll be trade eligible for a week ahead of the deadline, right? January 31st, if he indeed signs that today. If it's tomorrow, then, 6 days, whatever. So they could still trade him midseason if they want to. But I think with Allen, my thing is, we just had that little thought experiment with Hartenstein and went around on like, okay, where do these types of players fit? What tier are they in? All that stuff. But the market has kind of shown us that these players are exactly the types of guys that actually do end up getting caught in no man's land and get stuck on their own teams, right? I mean, I just covered a similar situation for 2-3 years of a saga like this with DeAndre Ayton. I think Allen has proven to be a better player, more valuable player, somebody more teams would want to have, but the Suns signed DeAndre Ayton to a max, and he became very difficult to trade right away until Joe Cronin convinced himself that he could turn his career around and bit the bullet on that whole thing, and the Suns got a breath of fresh air. But there's guys like this where not being a superstar, where you can create offense for yourself, and be a real difference maker on both sides consistently, or you're a role player and you're paid like it. That is a type of center that the league just doesn't value. So I think they're going to have a hard time trading him, period, unless the Pelicans can figure it out and get desperate enough to overpay and make it worth the Cavs' while. But bigger picture with all of this, to me, the bigger concern with it is at some point, and I've been on this since they got eliminated by the Knicks 2 years ago, is even if it means getting a little bit worse, the track that you just laid out, Chris, that this team could convince itself it could go down to improve with a coach and internal development, they're not allowing themselves to do that because Evan Mobley and Darius Garland are not going to reach their ceilings with the other players that are on this team. That's just a fact of reality. So the world where Kenny Atkinson plus more years of growth for the two young guys that were here before all of this ever got kicked off, that's just a fantasy land, in my opinion. That's not going to happen. The things that they need to get better at are not possible playing next to Donovan Mitchell and Jarrett Allen. So to me, I mean, yeah, it kind of, like, I guess if I zoom out another level, it's like they're a small market and they're scared of taking that step back and trusting that they can get better with those internal development happening. They want to stick with what they know can win them 45 to 52 games, and they'll ride that out. And that's totally respectable, but I don't think as a fan what you necessarily want to see.
I mean, I think the point about Mobley in particular, I think Evan Mobley might be the biggest loser in all of this. Like, I really tend to think that he is being stifled here. It is not like, and the difference between, I think, this and like the Oklahoma City thing with Hartenstein and Holmgren as a point of comparison is I think we might see Chet and Hartenstein play together some next year. I think it's inevitable, and it's going to work better because we know Holmgren can and will shoot threes. That does not happen with Mobley yet, and Allen doesn't do it. Unless Evan Mobley shows up shooting threes this summer, I think we're going to have some of the same problems. And I also don't think we have seen Mobley have to get pushed out of his comfort zone. That to me is just such a major problem in all of this. Like you just gave him a 5-year rookie max extension, a deal that I don't agree with this, but when you looked at the poll that Tim Bontemps, I think, did ESPN and the worst moves of the summer, someone said that was the worst move of the summer. You're not going to get what you need out of Evan Mobley for him to reach his value and maximize what that's going to be in this setup. I think that to me is probably the biggest flag against it, is that you're still continuing to say, hey, Evan Mobley, you don't get to figure out exactly what you can be as a 5 in this league.
So I have a point on the Mobley thing, but I just did want to ask, we have not gotten the Jarrett Allen contract details, right? We don't know whether or not it's sort of like the Hartenstein thing where it sort of declines as an option at the end. We don't have anything on that. So I would be interested to see those details when they come out, because that could tell a little bit more of a story of what it is that the Cavaliers front office is thinking with Jarrett Allen. But to the Evan Mobley point, maybe that's the guy you trade, right? We've been talking this whole time about trying to trade Jarrett Allen and why there's only a few teams that actually make sense for Jarrett Allen. But there's a lot more teams who make a lot more sense for Evan Mobley. And if you've already decided, well, we're keeping Jarrett Allen because he's the best guy with Donovan Mitchell, and we're basically all in on Donovan Mitchell, we're not all in on Evan Mobley, then just trade Mobley. And maybe there's a version here of what the Kings and the Pacers did, where the Kings take their really young, promising guy in Tyrese Halliburton, who didn't fit with their established guy in De'Aaron Fox, and swapped him for a guy that they would have no business otherwise trading for, and Domantas Sabonis, who amplified all the things that their established star does well. I don't know what that trade is. It's not Brandon Ingram, but it's something like going out and getting a wing who can kind of play off of Donovan Mitchell, or a power forward who makes more sense next to Jarrett Allen.
They could, if they could trade Mobley for, if honestly, this slight hot take, if the Jazz said we'll give you Markkanen for Mobley, I would probably do it.
That might be the best path forward, because I do tend to agree with Brendan where it's, well, what are you doing right here? But I get it. Like, they weren't the best coach team last year. There's no rush to do anything. There really isn't. You just signed everybody. They're locked in. It makes a little bit of sense to me if you were to say, well, let's just at least see what the new coach can do. And then maybe by January, February, we're ready to make some changes, or even next summer.
You know what this kind of makes me appreciate, or what other team it kind of makes me appreciate, is the Kings. We can all quibble with the idea of the Kings getting in their own way and the mess of the Mike Brown contract negotiation extension saga that happened in the spring, and the DeRozan deal, and if giving up that very far out, unprotected pick swap or lightly protected pick swap is too big of a risk and all that. But I appreciate that the Kings didn't rest on their laurels and say, we sucked for so long, we're fine being decent, it is what it is. They kind of did that with the Domantas Sabonis extension. We'll just, for the purposes of me continuing to make this argument, I'll ignore that. But like, generally speaking, they kept pushing, right? They've kept making moves. They've tried different things. And the Cavs feel like, hey, we've been irrelevant outside of LeBron being on our team for the entire century. So being relevant is pretty nice. Donovan Mitchell makes us that. Jarrett Allen, these high floor guys, it feels pretty good to be in this position. Let's just ride that out and not rush into anything. And yeah, rushing into things can come up short and the floor can fall out underneath of you sometimes. But I also think pushing, being aggressive, being flexible, being opportunistic, that's always going to get you further. So I wish the Cavs would do that a little bit more and be willing to just take that risk. And yeah, maybe you get 10% worse, but if it makes you 50% better in 5 years or 3 years, then ultimately that's worth it. But they don't seem to see it and do the math that way.
Well, the Kings also made that risk, and it was definitely risky to trade Halliburton for Sabonis because nobody doubts right now Halliburton is far more the valuable player now, and I think everybody was sort of clowning the Kings for doing that in the first place, even before Halliburton proved what he was.
On top of that, wouldn't you take Halliburton over Fox as well? Like that's the other part, like kind of the unspoken part of this. Like I think I'd rather have Halliburton than Fox.
That was less clear, but now obviously. But I don't know, even De'Aaron Fox, because they make that trade and pair him with Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox becomes an All-NBA caliber guard. Sabonis,
I don't think the gap's that big.
Of his career.
I don't think it's huge.
Yeah, it's not as big.
If you put Fox on a team that's built like the Pacers, I think it might feel pretty similar.
Yeah. So, by trading the thing that is better but doesn't fit, you improve the stuff that was already there and the thing that you traded for. That's really hard to figure out. Like it's hard to get that chemistry exactly right and it not blow up in your face. But the Kings did it, right? Like they hit that sweet spot, and that would be sort of the thing that the Cavaliers had to do. And I even go back to last season when we did our like end of the Cavaliers like season eulogy thing. I said, this is a team with an abundance of resources that has an opportunity, and a rare one, to pivot and not really take a step back if they make the right moves. They have to identify the right players and make the right moves and make the right trades. They probably, and this is just my guess, concluded the right move, the right deal, the right trade, just because everybody was plugging in Jarrett Allen for Brandon Ingram in the trade machine, did not make sense for us. It wasn't out there. So let's just wait it out and wait for the right stuff to come along. I do think it's a fair point that Brendon made earlier. You don't necessarily have to extend Jarrett Allen. Maybe that was sort of everybody threw him under the bus in that Athletic article at the end of the year, so maybe I can make good like a Jordan Poole extension. Sorry, one of our guys punched you in the face. Here's a bunch of money.
Yeah, I mean,
about it.
Marcus Morris did like go on a show and basically insinuate that Jarrett Allen was soft. Then JB Bickerstaff, when he got fired, basically said that he kind of insinuated that he thought Jarrett could have played through the ribs.
But it is why I want to see the details on this contract, because there's a world where, depending on what it looks like, he almost becomes more tradable.
Well, I think he becomes more tradable.
So we'll see
with it, no matter what. Just because if they understood that it wasn't going to happen this summer, and you're looking at next deadline, then under the deal before he got this extension, he only had 2 years left. So by that deadline, you're really trading him on the last year of his contract. If you're already, all the way through that this upcoming season, so. Now, whatever team might acquire him, you're looking at it as, hey, we got him for 4.5 years, and I'm sure that goes a long way. You're not
dealing with the marketing situation. You're not dealing with the marketing situation now, where teams are like, well, we either get him and we have to deal with the contract extension ourselves, or we got him on the contract extension and now we're dealing with this tight window of whether or not we're going to be able to trade for him. So you just sort of swallow that pill now so that you can not have to deal with it later.
I don't have a great case for Luke Kennard, but
let's make it. Try to make it.
No, I just want to use it
too. So I'm interested to hear where you're going with it.
Basically, want to use it as an excuse to just hype up the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't think bringing back Luke Kennard is some kind of massive element in that, but obviously he was supposed to make like 14-15 million. They declined the team option, end up bringing him back on a smaller number. They're dealing with tax stuff. They got rid of Zaire Williams in order to make this happen, but to me, it's just a reminder that Memphis continues to be all in and that they are going to be back. And obviously, when they acquired Luke Kennard, we all thought it was smart because they've needed shooting for a while. But even if he's the 8th, 9th, 10th man at this point, with the growth that Bane has had and Vince Williams coming along and everything else, this is just a deep, good, well-rounded team that is getting Ja Morant back. Mike Miller, his agent, his new agent, came out today and was kind of echoing this same thing, obviously what an agent should do. But I tend to agree that people...
Also just a funny thing.
It is. Paolo's agent as well. I just tend to agree with Mike Miller that people have sort of forgotten about this team and Ja. And I guess it's just, another excuse to say, hey, don't forget the Memphis Grizzlies. I think they could be a top 6 seed and push for the 2nd or 3rd round in the Western Conference playoffs, and I would not be shocked at all.
Can I make the case for Luke Kennard then?
Yeah.
And not just use it
Great.
as a vehicle to...
Let me know how he's going to play defense this year, and I'll be all in.
Hype? Doesn't matter. He's on a 1-year, $11 million contract. A real nice, chunky deal for a team that didn't make a lot of offseason moves this summer. You could take that expiring $11 million deal and trade that for something real. Like, you can get a real player for that in February when there's other teams that are tanking in the Cooper Flag Cup or whatever we're calling it. You could pair that with Brandon Clark's $12.5 million deal, perhaps, if he comes back from this injury looking okay and as a player that somebody wants. Even a John Conchar, who's a really consumable $6 million contract. Like, they have now that one kind of base level salary that you could stack other things onto and make a pretty substantial move with that. I mean, heck, you can even put it onto Marcus Smart's contract, and now you've got a plus $30 million contract or package that you could send out into different places. And the Grizzlies are flush with draft picks as well, as a reminder. So this is a team that didn't make a lot of noise in the summer, which is okay. The whole point of the last 12 months is just getting Ja Morant back and healthy and fine. So you presumably have accomplished that. We'll see what Ja Morant looks like this coming season. But then you've positioned yourself now to make a pretty substantial move if you want to before the trade deadline and maybe really go for it.
That was not really a case for Luke Kennard. I just want to say that was a case for trading Luke Kennard, if we're being honest.
That was what's the new
I don't have any
new terminology, human trade chip.
Have any of us said? I mean, I don't think any of us.
I'll take $11 million to be a human trade chip. I have no problem with it.
That's true. I mean, a little less of their taxes, but agent fees, all of these things, but more than I made last year. The thing about Kennard that, at least as long as he's there, that I do like is that it is another shooter. Him and Ja together defensively is tough. It's a lot of pressure on Jaren Jackson. It's a lot of pressure on the rest of that team, to Marcus Smart, to like really shore that up. But if Kennard is anything, he's going to be a really good shooter. He's going to move off ball. He can get up quick shots. He's going to at least fit with what I think that offense needs. And if it doesn't work, to your point, it's an $11 million trade chip. Like, he's a useful player. I think can be a good player on a good team. It's circumstantial a little bit because of his limitations, but like that's a solid player for $11 million, and he'll at least help them until they want to trade him.
I think you guys might be overstating what that is going. It's going to have to be stacked with somebody as a player who has real value, whether that is Smart or
Clark.
If Clark looks, but I mean, are we positive Brandon Clark's going to be that? I mean, I would like to think it, but he keeps pushing back his timeline. He's not with Team Canada right now. They could really use him because he continued this never-ending recovery. So we'll see. But I think a team is going to look at 2 months of Luke Kennard on an $11 million deal that very well the future for him could be minimums every year after this is not going to be very high by itself. So you're either stacking a lot of picks with just him, or you're having to add in players that are really, really good to make that worth the other team's while. But big picture, this rotation, Ja, Bane, Smart, Aldama, Jackson, Clark, Kennard, Edey, Vince Williams, Gigi Jackson, somewhere maybe a little John Conchar sprinkled in, maybe a little less Gigi Jackson, depending on how he develops as a 20-year-old. That's a hell of a team, and it's kind of doesn't have many holes. So outside of shooting, which I agree is a good reason to bring Kennard back, they're always going to be desperate for that. But I don't know. I just think I think you could make a case this team is pretty significantly better than the first iteration of these Grizzlies teams that were 50-plus win groups and, vying for the second, third round every year. I think they're even better than that.
Yeah, I think we need to maybe slow down a little bit on that, just because I need to see Ja Morant. I know he looked awesome when he came back from the suspension, and then he gets hurt
for a week.
But he has dealt with so much over the last year plus. It's just mentally, physically hard to come back from that. I remain a Ja Morant optimist and a huge fan of his, so I'm rooting for the best. And if you had to make me bet $5, I would bet that he's fine. He's young enough and all these things, but it's just a lot to come back from everything that he's gone through. But if he looks anything close to what he has been for most of his career, then I'm totally with you. I'm totally here on the Grizzlies bandwagon there. Can I make a quick point, just since we didn't even talk about the Precious Achiuwa part?
Yeah.
1 year, $6 million for what is going to end up being the Knicks starting center for a few games.
Yeah, no,
the starting center right now is Mitchell Robinson, which means
more than
that
a few.
Precious Achiuwa is definitely starting some games. They have Mitchell Robinson, Jericho Sims, and now Achiuwa coming back on a 1 year, $6 million deal, which is a nice deal for him, or for the Knicks, I should say. Kind of not great for Precious, but that's it. Those are my Precious Achiuwa thoughts. They might have just paid $6 million to bring back a player who's going to start quite a few games for him.
Yeah, Achiuwa, my only point there. We also might see some Julius Randle at the 5. A lot of people have talked about how they have the flexibility to do that in a way that they didn't with the previous construction of the roster when it was quickly and smaller guys. But Achiuwa to me is funny with this Knicks situation because the question with him was always, what is he? Is he a forward? Is he a center? Is he maybe a wing? Like, what exactly is this guy's role? Kind of the curse of being too versatile. And it's just funny to me that the destination in his career where that would finally lock in and he would excel in a very specific role and answer that question is for a coach who has actively refused to ever play this type of player at center ever before. It's just like a very funny pairing of Tibbs and Achiuwa, where Achiuwa plays up from what we thought because Tibbs, who wants to play a traditional center, is like begrudgingly like, damn it, I guess that's my only guy. So more of that this upcoming season will just be funny to watch.